보낸 사람은 월요 모임의 회원 루이스 모리스. 메리언 포프는 지난해 고인이 됐지만 1980년 5.18 상황을 기록해 뒀단 겁니다. 오래된 카세트 테이프 2개가 나왔습니다. 안에는 어떤 얘기들이 담겼을까? 녹음 시점부터가 놀라웠습니다.
Foregoing was recorded on the 30th of May in Seoul, and late this afternoon, Marion Pope arrived back from Gwangju.
5월 30일이라면 도청 희생자들의 피도 채 마르지 않은 광주가 최종 진압된 사흘 뒤입니다. 광주 시민들이 폭도로 몰려 학살된 뒤 모두가 숨 죽인 그때 포프는 참상을 생생히 증언하고 있습니다.
The student had been killed, and I went up to see. Because there was blood all up the stairs, so I went up and you could see where he had been at the window right above the front door. Look how wonderful the people have acted up one another, and if there had been, I think it was gangsters who were doing all that downtown, do you think they would have left the banks? Not a bank window has been touched. The army ordered the people to close their shops, and they just opened the back doors and sold on everything. No, there was no problem at all. People, are you short of food? I'll give you some painting.
그녀는 인간의 선한 마음과 용기를 끝까지 믿었습니다.
Struggle has been silenced, but not ended. More than ever, I am sure it will now become stronger. Surely the journalists will tell the news someday. In the meantime, watch and wait.
My name is David Kim Craig, and I've had the privilege of researching the history of the United Church relationship with the Korean Church, North and South. And in the course of my research, one of the people that came up in a very strong way, as you can imagine from what we've already heard, was Marion Pope. Now, I know that we're not supposed to talk about Marion Pope today. And then it said that Marion was a very mild-mannered person, but she was a little bit intimidating too. So I don't want to get on her bad side. So I'm talking about Korean history and using Marion Pope as a way to get into some important events, okay? In fact, two big ones that I wanted to talk about. And I've also provided a timeline of Marion's life, not because I wanted to talk about Marion, but I just thought it might be helpful to place, certain things on a timeline. So Marion was born in 1928, as Haran's already said, and graduated from nursing in 1949 and enrolled in the diaconal ministry program in 1953, commissioned as a missionary in 1955, arrived in Korea in 1957, started her work at Gwangju Christian Hospital in 1964, did graduate studies and completed grad studies and started teaching nursing at Iwa in 1975. Returned to Gwangju in 1980, right on before the events took place that have been talked about already. Earned her doctoral degree in 1984, which written in Korean. Preparing to return to Iwa to teach in Seoul in 1987, returned to Canada in 1993. Won the companion, was awarded Companion of the Center of Christian Studies in 2003, the Catherine Hawken Award in 2005, and passed last year. Here's a picture that was sent to me by the group that did the documentary in Korea, a picture of Marion and her nursing colleagues in Hanbok, taken in 1973. So, because we're not talking about Marion, I wanted to focus on two events that were quite central in the democratization movement in South Korea. And the first one I wanted to talk about was the March 1st Declaration of National Salvation. Now, some of you might have noticed my t-shirt. If you want to know what it says, you're going to have to ask Kay Cho. Where's Kay? There she is. She's already read it. This is the opening line in the Korean Declaration of Independence that was made in 1919. A very big symbolic moment which occurred under Japanese colonization. So this moment in 1976 was kind of piggybacking on this moment. Park Chung-hee had taken power by a coup and had kind of been governing under the veneer of democracy for a number of years. But by 1976, the veneer had largely come off. And it was time to stand up and do something to get the world to notice that democracy was going downhill in South Korea. So some people came up with an idea. There's a lovely backstory to that, which I'd love to tell you about, but we need a lot more time. This is Park Chung-hee, and you can see he had a high self-esteem. There are some missiles on a great big picture of himself. So people decided to come up with this declaration saying democracy in Korea is going real bad, and we want to stand up to Park Chung-hee. And Park Chung-hee had made it illegal to say anything bad about him by this time. So a group of people came together and wrote this declaration and had decided to announce it at this cathedral in Seoul, Myeongdong Cathedral, on March 1st, 1976. This is a picture of Yoo Jung, whose shawl is right here, and I'll say just a little bit more about that in a bit. They had this document, and they needed to get it into the Myeongdong, and they knew it was going to be surrounded by KCIA, who was going to be stopping everybody who had any look about them that they might be up to trouble, and search them to make sure you see what they were up to. Anyways, they knew they had to sneak the declaration in. So it was one of the Marion's birthdays. It might have been Marion Pope. And they invited Yoo Jung to come over to celebrate. And while they were celebrating the birthday, they hatched this plan that somebody was one of the three. Oh, so sorry. These are the two Marions and Willa Kernan, the three women missionaries who were involved in this plan. And somebody was going to sneak a letter, the document in, to see how I did that? Somebody was going to, and once they got into the Myeongdong Cathedral, they were going to slip the document to Yu Jung. Eh? Eh? And she was going to give it to somebody else who could get up in the pulpit and read it. Well, as it turns out, the person who was supposed to read all this went to plan. Okay? They got in. The person who was supposed to read, the KCIA picked up on him and arrested him before he could do it. So Yu Jung had this in her hand, and guess who got to read it? Which put her in the crosshairs, right? Anyways, that's another story. But the part of the aftermath was that Yu Jung and a bunch of other people, I was starting to get emotional. It's an incredible story. Anyway, they were arrested. They went to jail. Yu Jung underwent torture, deprived of sleep. Anyways, the guys that were involved, they spent a lot more time in jail. And as a protest to get them out, they had women in Korea. Yeah. They knitted the stoles. So this shawl, thank you. Joan Wyatt's got one on too. And so the knit involves, I can't knit, but I was told that it involves crocheted, thank you, crocheted with 3 movements, is that what you call it? 3 chains, but there was 4. There was, 4 chains, and each chain there was a Korean word to it, Han Guk Man Se, which is free Korea, long of Korea. So each one was crocheted, and it was an information raising campaign. The shawls went all over the world. And people in Canada and in the US and in Europe would buy the shawls from these women, raising funds for and also awareness of the men in jail. Yeah. And this one belonged to Yu Jung, was passed down to Marion Pope because Marion Pope. So the next one that I wanted to tell you about was the Gwangju. This is going to be hard because I got some stuff to read. I got some pictures first. So, Park Jong-hee, we've been introduced to that guy. He got worse and worse. 1979, his own KCIA director decided to take him out. So he was murdered, assassinated, which was on one hand really sad, on the other hand really good news for the democracy movement. A lot of people got really hopeful. Things were hopefully going to go back to democracy, but one of his generals had another plan, Chun Do-won. So Chun Do-won decided to take over, and because there was a lot of activism for democracy, decided to come down heavy with martial law. And Gwangju was the place where people took most exception to that. They kicked the army out, and for a while, the city itself was an island of democracy in South Korea. So as we can imagine, Chun Do-won didn't like that very much, and he sent in the army, and it was just a bloody massacre. And Marion had just moved back to Gwangju. She was at Gwangju Christian Hospital at the time, right there, and got to see some of these things firsthand that took place. So in the midst of this unfolding, she did a couple of things. She wrote a letter to her mom. And she also made that recording. And the recording was based on a document which exists and is contained in the archive in the East Asian Library in U of T, under the heading Korean Democratization or something like that. Anyways, this is a part I have to read, and there's no way in the world I'm going to be able to do this, I don't think. This is a letter to her mom, and this is a transcript, the images of those documents. And I wanted to share some stuff. I wonder, can somebody read? Can you? Thank you. She'll have to read it from the screen. Yeah.
Won't walk too far.
Yeah.
So Saturday, May 24th, 1980, 6:15 p.m. Every night since last Sunday brought the realization of the possibility of death. Only on Monday morning at 6 a.m., when I was awakened from a brief sleep by the sound of someone shouting for everyone to come out, did I feel fear. I dressed quickly, i.e. put on my outer clothes. This week I have slept in the skirt and blouse I wore Monday to come to work. The shout was a call from the apartment residents to join the students and citizens fighting the paratroopers downtown. How have the days and nights passed to become a week? It seems like an age come up yet one day. My greatest fear has been that the soldiers would come into the hospital and slaughter the young patients and staff, and perhaps other patients too. The waiting is an aspect of the torture, a strong weapon. How many have died, being shot or beaten and captured? Surely the journalists will tell the news someday. In the meantime, we watch and wait, knowing that the hundreds of brave young people are being sacrificed and are struggling to death for the truth against all the lies being broadcast on the radio and from the sky. Gwangju, May 25th, 1980. Dear Mom, you will be worried, I know. There is no way for anyone in Gwangju to contact anyone outside the city, but I will write this and post it at the first possible opportunity. I will phone or have someone else phone or cable to assure you all is well whenever I can. In the meantime, I am safe. The enemy is within the city as well as without, invisible, sniping here and there. Up to now, the toll should read 10 times what is coming over the radio from abroad. But what courage! I waited Monday morning for the hospital to start taking blood as one of the first, and was one of the first in the afternoon when they started, after the first victims began to arrive. But young people commandeered every kind of vehicle to bring in the injured and blood donors. The hospital staff worked on and on. No one need to ask anyone to work overtime, 2 shifts or 3, or to come back after a few hours rest. Our director of nurses went several days without sleep. We all found we couldn't sleep even when we lay down. I spoke of courage. The churchwoman took food to the patients and gave food to the young people, knowing that the cost might be great. The hospital accepted every patient, knowing the cost to themselves. Helicopters circle the skies continuously. Planes broadcast, and the radio tells us clearly of the consequences of feeding the hungry. And the sad thing is that many citizens misunderstand who the hungry are and call them bad names like the radio does. Like countless others, I've been taken in, fed, and given a place to sleep in comfort since I can't go back and forth to my apartment in the suburbs. It's too dangerous. How meaningful the scriptures become, how simple and true. Blessed are those that suffer. Feed the hungry. Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Joshua chapter 6. Today is Pentecost. Encouraging.
Thank you, Nan. There was no way I was going to get through that. This is a little bit of a story connected to that event. A few months later, Lois Wilson was able to visit South Korea. Lois Wilson, the moderator of the United Church of Canada at the time, and was smuggled down into the city where there was still a lot of repression. You know, they didn't want the news to get out. And she was able to talk to Cho Ara, who was running the YWCA in the city, and she got the lowdown and was able to smuggle some of the information out. It's another part of that story that's, I think, very important, and no doubt Marion had a role in getting her down there. There's a great story about that too. Wish I could. I think I might be able to get through this. This is something that she wrote in 1978, before all this happened, and in Gwangju, and I thought that I'd share it with you just because it shows you the kind of spirit that Marion was working with that led her into these different activities. Last year on mission night, the General Assembly, the Assembly presented me with a plaque in honor of my 20 years of service in Korea. This is 1978. During its 25 years history, the PROK, the Partner Church of the United Church in South Korea, has joined her zeal of evangel to a mission for justice in the years of post-war liberation. We have grown up together missionaries in the church. What maturity we have attained is due to the church, the Korean church, guiding patiently, lovingly, permissively, allowing mistakes and freedom to learn the role of a missionary. Over the past 6 years, especially, the PROK has developed her mission of evangel and justice. Many members have accepted the cost of discipleship. Missionaries have been allowed to share in the support of the body of the church in all her members and in their suffering and joy. We have been challenged to grow together in seeking the truth and learning to love, in struggling for justice for others, and in experiencing forgiveness, in using peaceful means toward the restoration of freedom, and in striving to be non-judgmental. Such is the generosity of this church that she not only gives us all these gifts, but thanks us for being there. Yeah. The last picture, one of the moments I had the honor of being in Marion's presence. I'm standing right next to her. I don't know if you can recognize me, but this was the celebration of the 100th year anniversary of the beginning of the Canadian mission in Korea. And you'll see a bunch of familiar faces, I'm sure. But it was a highlight. It was a beautiful moment for me. I was an exchange student in South Korea at the time. And I wanted to leave you with that. Yes, yes, Nat. Willa Kernan, Marion Current, Lenore Beecham. Where's Mary Collins? She's Lois Wilson. Oh, there you are, Mary. Yeah. Hello. Lori Crockard, yeah. Ian Robb. Sang Chul Lee, yeah. Funny story. Yeah, okay. And then I'm done.
The funny story is that Lois Wilson and I were rooming together, and when Lois traveled, she had a little tiny backpack, and that was all she ever brought. And in that picture, there's a banner in the background that was about 5 foot wide and about 6 foot long, maybe 4 foot wide, and it rolled up. And the problem was that Lois just liked to get on and off a plane with no luggage. She was going back to Toronto, and myself and an Anglican colleague were going on somewhere else from there. And we asked Lois, we said, you have to take this back to the General Council office. It's been given to the United Church. She was furious.
Well, that's a great question. Did anybody else kind of feel inspired by those stories? I mean, when I started to hear those stories, I was just fascinated. And so that's what drew me in. So yeah, I got it. First of all, thanks to Sang Chul Lee, who helped to set up an exchange program here at Emmanuel College with Hanshin University in South Korea. I got to go over there, and I met people who'd known Marion, and I met Nan, who could tell me stories, and Mary Collins, and who shared stories, and other people. And I started to learn about this, and I thought, why didn't I know any of this before? And so many years later, I got a chance to go back to school. I did a PhD on the topic. I was able to produce a book, which is a very pale, just touches the surface of an incredible history. And I wish more people knew about it. I was really happy to be able to share about Gwangju today, because that didn't make it into my book. That was one of those precious things that got left out. But as I said, those letters are at the East Asian Library in their archives. Yes, in Robarts. I can't remember, eighth floor. It's been a while. And we can share those snippets from the slide. Yeah. Oh, that is true. I think you might be right. These days you do need to get so I have all right. I've got pictures of the letters, which I think I can share. And I can make those available to people in this group. Yeah.
Anyway, so I want to go to the second theme of women's struggles, because the 90s was a time in which women's concerns and women's issues were being heard, really heard. And feminist theology was taking off all over the world. The Reimagining Conference happened in 1993. It brought together over 2,000 people, most of them women. Were you there? You were Joan Wyatt? Yep. In Minneapolis. And it was opened by this incredible presentation by Chung Kyung Kyung, a professor of theology at Ewha. And she went on to become a professor of theology at Union Seminary in New York, and she's still there today. And in Seoul, Reverend Chung Sukja had started this radical new model of church that she called Women Church. And women were challenging sexism in the structures and the theology of the churches. And that was true at home, and it was true in Korea. And across Korea and beyond, there was a global campaign that was rising, demanding an apology, compensation, and redress from Japan for the hundreds of Korean so-called comfort women who were forced into sexual slavery to Japanese troops during World War II, the war in the Pacific. So it was a groundbreaking time as women's concerns and their contributions increasingly impacted church and society. Now, during those years, the struggle for the reunification of the Korean Peninsula was front and center as well, and Koreans yearned for the political divisions to end, for family members to be able to be reunited for the first time since the war before it was too late. And there's such deep, as you say, Han, deep pain over this and a deep yearning for it to happen. And so in the 1980s, and Rhea Whitehead, my predecessor, was part of these, and then then in the 90s as well, in secret, the World Council of Churches had begun what became a series of meetings between church leaders from both the north and the south of the Korean Peninsula, as well as those churches that had historic roots in earlier pre-war mission work on either side of the 38th parallel. In the decade that I worked at the DWO, I attended a couple of those meetings on behalf of the United Church. There were only a couple during that decade. They weren't held often, and it was a profound experience, really, as leaders came together, so wary, so concerned, and yet so looking for opportunity for a breakthrough. And so relationships at those meetings between officials from North and South began to be reestablished. And the doors that had been closed became slightly more open. And I remember Canadian Eric Weingartner. He lives just south of North Bay, Ontario. Eric and his family. Eric was working for the World Council of Churches, and he was invited to come to North Korea and to Pyongyang and to live there to further these opening days of communications. And so they did. I will never forget the morning in 1995 when I came into the office to find that there was a fax that had arrived from Pyongyang. It had come from the head of the Korean Christian Federation, Kang Young-sop, who was the nephew of Kim Il-sung. Kang was asking for help. I couldn't believe it. In the wake of a devastating harvest in the north, and was appealing for food aid and support. So surprised. It was, to my knowledge, the first direct communication from Pyongyang to the United Church since the Korean War, that fax. And the Canadian churches responded in the months that followed by raising funds to purchase food aid. It was coordinated by the Canadian Food Grains Bank in Winnipeg, delivered through Caritas Hong Kong the following year. That delivery and the distribution of the food aid became the first of 3 trips I was privileged to take to the north. And it represented a greater reopening, right, of bilateral relationships that were so important between Canadian churches and the North Korean church. So the door had been reopened just a little. So I want to close with 2 more remembrances from these years when I best knew Marion. Back to Marion. So 1998 marked the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Republic of Korea. And Marion and Patty Evans, who at the time was chair of the former DWO, and myself were there at the PROK's General Assembly and the celebrations. So on the actual day, Marion suggested that we should be sure to watch the fireworks. And they were being planned. It was going to be a big thing. Great, I thought, great. But when nighttime fell, Marion took us down to the shore of the Han River, where there was a speedboat waiting that she had arranged. And I thought, uh-oh. It was pitch dark on the river. And I had heard stories about the state of the Han River, of carcasses floating down and logs and all manner of things. The boat had only this little tiny signal light on the bow of the boat, no forward light at all. And Patty was recalling that at some point in our journey, because Marion was determined, stubborn, one could say, determined that we would have the best view of these fireworks. Patty was saying that at some point the motor quit. I also apparently got totally soaked, but all I remember was getting increasingly terrorized. So the driver took off at super high speed on this river, no light, across the Han to the other side and down a ways in the pitch dark. Now, I'm not afraid of boats. As a teenager, I have myself driven a boat in the pitch dark at too high a speed, but this was frankly scary. So I said to Marion, Marion, this feels dangerous. We can't see. He's going way too fast. To which Marion, seated calmly, looked towards the sky and she said, better not to think. I have used those words so many times in my life since. So the last event I want to tell you about was the result of 3 years of planning between the Presbyterian Church in Canada and the United Church and the United Methodist Church, in particular within the U.S. National Council of Churches. We had visited with church and government women leaders in both the North and the South to suggest that they might meet together in a quiet, private summit of their own. And slowly, over a couple of years, agreement formed that this would be a welcome thing. But the question was, where should we hold such a meeting? When it was suggested that we could go to Paris, Ontario, that is, and gather at the United Church's Five Oaks Center, that seemed to really fit the bill. It was private, it was secluded, it was warm, it was friendly, wasn't too expensive. Perfect. And so in October of 2001, 2 delegations of women arrived at Pearson Airport, one from the DPRK, one from the ROK, and they were whisked down to Five Oaks. I'll never forget the first evening. We were gathered in that upper room at Five Oaks with the fireplace, and if you've been there, it was a comfortable, large lounge on the top floor, and the women from the north were all at one end of the room, and the women from the south were all at the other end of the room. I said, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? But we tried, and gradually they began to interact with each other, and it was amazing. Because over the days that followed, substantial talks took place. There were walks in the woods together. Meals were shared. Worship happened. Relationships warmed. Relationships were established. The head of the South Korean delegation, already been mentioned today, Yu Chang, who had been one of only 4 elected assemblywomen in the 300-member National Assembly in Seoul. And she, as Fran mentioned, had studied at Emmanuel College right here. I can't remember the name of the gracious leader from the North, but her presence was both warm and commanding. Towards the end of that time, at Five Oaks, we took a full day off to visit the Butterfly Museum at Niagara. And the bus, it was so fun. And the bus was just full of joyous laughter and conversation and friendship. At the end of the time at Five Oaks, we came to Toronto and we held a public worship service at Bloor Street. Was anybody there? Does anybody remember that? I see one hand. Well, the rest of you missed it. It was good. It was good. But we held the service at Bloor Street, United Church, and the following morning, we held a farewell gathering on Charles Street, just outside the door of what was then the United Church Archives and is now all under construction, that corner. The two leaders of the two delegations planted together a ginkgo tree as a tree of peace, and a brass commemorative plaque was laid. Now that tree died in the last few years, but we have assurances from Victoria University that they will replace it, if not with a ginkgo, with something that maybe will survive a little longer. I don't know, it's your problem. But the whole event had been the first face-to-face gathering of government and church women since the Korean War. It was history. And of course, as we know, like so many moments in her lifetime, Marion was there. God rest her spirit. Amen and thank you.
Well, I too am blatantly going against Marion's wish because I am totally focused on Marion. And it's not I who am speaking in this, it's her former colleagues in Korea. I worked in Korea through the United Church of Canada with our partner church there, 1979 to 83. So I was in Seoul when Gwangju massacre. And so I knew Marion at that time. And then 15 years later, I was able to get back and worked there 1998 to the end of 2009. First time I wasn't able to go back, they wouldn't give me a visa because I had helped in the struggle for justice. So I'm able to give you some direct quotes from some of Marion's former colleagues and students and fellow church members in Korea, spoken to me over the phone or through letters that they sent through me to Marion. I'm seeing Patty there. And the other Patty. Several weeks before I was due to come on home assignment from Korea, I had been asked to make the formal introduction of Marion Pope at the February 2005, David had it on his thing there, February 2005 gathering in Toronto, when she was given the Catherine Hawken Award for Global Cross-Cultural Mission and Ministry. This was a huge task, but in the end, I decided to simply be a channel for the voices of the Korean people among whom she had served in Korea. I was able to talk directly with several of them, telling them of the award she was being granted and asking them what messages they would like to send her. Marion's profound understanding of and respect for Korean culture was reflected in her teaching and research. She pioneered the exploration and teaching of Korean culture as a basis of developing Korean culturally appropriate nursing practice, research, ethics, and education. Professor Ewon Hee of Yonsei University told me in rapid-fire English, she gave us insight into how to develop nursing in the Korean context. Don't just borrow from the West, she told us. Use your own Korean perspective. We learned from her that Korean nursing has a lot to offer. Her influence is still being felt. Tell her that because of her, we are trying to develop what we need to do as Korean nursing scholars for a global perspective. Professor Han Yong-nan of Ewha Women's University wrote to Marion, "You helped me to see all in context as a nurse. I learned that theory and practice must not be separated, but rather in harmony. You are still teaching me in my life." Marion's understanding of partnership shaped her teaching style of engaging others in their own learning process. She believed in us, wrote Dr. Chang Hyo-soon, former student of Marion and now or then professor of nursing. When our knowledge began to sprout, she pushed us to discover things for ourselves, using our own abilities. She was our enabler. Her example is, even now, creating changes in my own life, as well as in the lives of all her students. Marion shared her understanding of and deep respect for Korean culture in the church as well. Among the people of Kobek Church in Gwangju, that was her church, joyously writing letters to Marion for this occasion in 2005, one of them told Marion, "You encouraged us to use the traditional Korean hymns. You led our choir, giving many opportunities to sing Korean music composed in the unique Korean rhythm. You encouraged us to wear Korean traditional dress, yourself wearing it on every special occasion, and we realized how beautiful is our Korean hanbok." In teaching Korean music and hymns and respect for their own culture, Marion helped Korean Christians realize the extent to which worship in Korea had been shaped by Western culture, and encouraged them to root their worship life in their own cultural context. Marion's Christian witness in her deep caring for people was so often mentioned. "You showed me what is a true Christian," Professor Han Yong-nan wrote. "You didn't want a lot of things, only a simple life, enough food and clothing, and you shared the rest with others in the community. Even though you had a painful leg, you climbed to the hill villages to meet the humble poor people and teach them to take care of themselves." Professor Chang Hyo-soon wrote, "She showed us what it meant to have a true faith by her own example, and she raised our consciousness of those who are marginalized in Korean society and opened our eyes to the various political situations at the moment." And a medley of voices from Kobek Church in Gwangju. "In your love and goodness and generous heart, in your unyielding stand for justice, you embodied the love of God. Your love and deep faith is still vividly alive in our congregation." And another, "You always took the side of the poor and oppressed and suffering, never ignoring them, all for justice." And Elder An Song-ne of Kobek Church in Gwangju, remembering when the people of Gwangju stood up against the brutal oppression of their dictatorship government, wrote now to Marion, "During those 10 days, you ran a dangerous risk. You supported and helped the injured and saved many lives, encouraging others to donate blood for the injured. You secretly hid people from the police. Gwangju was cut off from the rest of the world, but you tried to communicate the truth to the outside. We will never forget." That same friend, Elder An Song-ne, was the first woman elder of Kobek Church. The story of her ultimate election to that position was Marion's account of the, quote, "struggle to hold the beliefs, values, and practices related to the gospel and culture in creative tension." With penetrating questions and observations, Marion helped awaken consciousness of the church's reflection of society's traditional treatment of women as inferior to men, and helped plant the seeds of changing thought and action for equal justice for all. Reverend Chung Suk-ja in Seoul also told me, from her own personal experience, of Marion's role of insisting on, encouraging, and enabling the development of women's leadership and women's equal status in church and society. Voices from Korea. And Marion continued that same role here in Canada, in her own congregation, in Korean language congregations, and in the wider church.
Yes, for people who don't know me, I'm Patty Evans. I was chair of the Division of World Outreach during many of those years, 92 to 2000. But I first met Marion, we were roommates at a Division of World Outreach meeting when I was in another role. And so we were nurse to nurse because that's my background. And we talked about her research. And so I found that quite inspiring. It was later I found out she did all that in Korean, and I thought, oh, amazing. Um, and um, and then I had the opportunity to be on that trip and to be in the Han River with her in that boat. And Nan's actual question to her, because Nan and I were talking, I've got a little more detailed memory, was she said, "So, Marion, what do you think?" And that's when she said, "Better not to think." Um, and uh, and she was not only concerned about the things that might be floating in the river, but if the police found this boat floating without a motor with these foreigners in it, it was not a situation she was interested in being part of. And the fact is, in the dark, it became less dark because we were going to see the fireworks. Well, before we got to the shore, the fireworks started and we were in it. And then we had to get up the wall because it was quite raised and it was a very high retaining wall. We had to climb up. And by now, Marion had some ambulatory issues. I don't know who pushed her up that wall. I was so busy climbing up. And I have no recollection of how we got back to the boat at the end. It occurred to us up there, we had to also go down. And it was on our return trip that the motor totally died. And so it was very memorable. Oh, yes, I was wearing flip-flops. We had a lot of rain there. But I also want to comment that she was a tremendous support to me in my leadership. I'm not one of the women in ordained ministry, but I have had the gift of being invited to considerable leadership positions across the church. And if ever I had a champion, a supporter, it was Marion. We in the Division of World Outreach decided, as Ria and I came in as General Secretary and new chair, that we were going to decide everything by a consensus model. So we learned and grew together to be able to do that over the 8 years that I chaired the division. And Marion was just behind us all the way. And when we were in Korea, my recollection was that it was on the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II. Thus, the fireworks, the bringing down the Japanese building that had been built. In the morning, it was there. By evening, it was gone. We saw that happen on the TV. She told us to take toothpaste with us as we were out and about in the city later. Toothpaste? I thought I'd clean my teeth. No, it was in case there was any tear gas. And I thought, this is the advice of a warrior. And so we all dutifully had toothpaste in our bags. And then we were at Imjingak in a big heat wave, 40 degrees. And all the women in the United Church, a lot of people remember, we wrote on the prayer on strips of white cloth, prayer things. They were sent to Korea. This was at the request of the church in Korea. They were sent to Korea When we got there, they had made wall hangings, things on the floor. And when we got to Imjingak for this right by the border, we couldn't take pictures beyond that particular gate. People held those up and down the rows. And the president of the UCW was with us and found the one she had made. It was unbelievable. We also had the opportunity for this prayer shawl that you see here. And on Sunday, just this past Sunday, at my church, we were looking for another wall hanging besides the Pentecost one we had. And I brought this and explained the meaning of that and our relationship with the Presbyterian Church in the Republic of Korea. So all of this to say that she was a champion of women in ministry, whether they were ordained or not. And so her desire to have us focus on that today, I'm a living representation of her work in doing that. And for that, I'm supremely grateful. My final comment is, on a very hot day, be sure you sit just on the right side of her because she has a fan. I learned that trick. And our church isn't air conditioned, so fan goes with me. And that was just one of the many wonderful things she did and a tremendous gift to my life.
So I hope that the sensitivities within me will not remain only as survival instincts that protect me. I hope they become pastor and diaconal sensitivities, a sensitivity to notice when someone is uncomfortable, to sense when someone is being excluded, to listen carefully to pain that has not yet been spoken, and to care for people's life and dignity. So this is also one of the reasons I was drawn to diaconal ministry. Marion Pope was a diaconal minister, and through her life, I have been learning that diaconal ministry is not about staying at the center. It is about moving toward the edges, accompanying the vulnerable, and embodying love and justice in concrete ways. So for me, courageous witness is at the heart of diaconal ministry, diaconal spirit, and courageous witness does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it means learning when to speak openly about my life and when to remain quiet for safety. And not out of shame, but out of wisdom. Sometimes it means saying the word queer in a Korean Christian space. Sometimes it means staying in a difficult conversation just a little longer, even when my instinct is to disappear. I do not think courageous witness means being fearless. For me, it means being faithful while still feeling fear. It means asking when silence protects me and when silence protects injustice. It means allowing my survival, my sensitivity, and my faith to become small practices of care, courage, and welcome. So now I'm still learning one small step at a time, but Miriam's life challenges me not to hold the freedom and safety I have found only for myself. So today, there are people around us who maybe carry physical wound in the same way as those Marion encountered, but whose souls have been deeply wounded by rejection, shame, exclusion, and fear. And there are people who have been told by church, family, or society, there is no place for you. Still, there are a lot. There are people whose spirit are exhausted from simply trying to survive. So I do not want to remember Marion Pope only as a great figure from the past. I remember her as someone who still challenges me today. Okay, she challenges me to live my own boundary crossing life more faithfully, one small step at a time, and to become a small bridge of life for others. So for me, this is part of her legacy, and this is where I continue to listen for my own calling. And maybe this is where our next question begins. So if calling leads us to cross boundaries for the sake of life, then what does that look like in our concrete ministries today? Here we go.
I think our lives have been challenging because of our gender, culture, and sexual orientation. Yet, these very aspects have also become sources of strength as we continue to listen to our calling. I have come to understand that this calling, especially in the midst of hardship, is deeply connected to Marion's legacy as a courageous witness. We have also learned that our calling is deepened through the work we do today, standing against prejudice through ministries such as affirming ministry and anti-racism ministry, and through our work with crew, as known as Korean Rainbow United. Although this sometimes requires us to take risks, but we courageously cross the threshold of fear to stand in solidarity with those who are oppressed and vulnerable. So, Harim, if Marion Pope planted the seeds of life by crossing boundaries and standing with the vulnerable, what seeds of hope are we planting today through the work with Korean Rainbow United?
I wonder how many of you ever heard about Korean Rainbow United? Oh, more than we expected. Great. So, yeah, for me, Korean Rainbow United is one of the places where I see those seeds of hope being planted today. So KRU stands for, already Grace said, Korean Rainbow United, and it began around 2021 within the United Church of Canada, formed by Korean ministers and lay people, queer people, and allies who shared a concern for Korean LGBTQ people, their families, and their faith communities. And KRU is a small grassroots community across Canada, and we support and connect Korean LGBTQ people and allies through community building, education, advocacy, and translating resources related to LGBTQ lives, faith, and theology. So KRU is not a big institution. We do not have a large staff, a huge budget, or a building with our own name on it. Sometimes our ministry looks like a Zoom link, Google Doc, and a few faithful, stubborn people who still believe this work matters. But to understand why KRU matters, we need to understand the context. In Korean society, Confucian values, patriarchy, family expectations, and conservative Christian culture are deeply woven together. Because of that, many LGBTQ Koreans have very few places where they can truly breathe. And that reality does not simply disappear when people immigrate to Canada or United States. Even in Canada, where LGBTQ plus people have legal protection and affirming churches exist, many Korean LGBTQ people still experience stigma, shame, and rejection within their own families and communities. So there's also another painful layer for many Korean LGBTQ immigrants. Because some of us leave Korea searching for freedom, like me and my wife, and a place where can live, safely. We for freedom and safety. But even after we arrive in Canada, we may find ourselves avoiding Korean people, Korean church, and Korean language and Korean cultural spaces in order to stay safe. That is very painful because Korean language and culture are not just background for us, they are part of our deepest identity. They are connected to memory, family, food, prayer, humor, and home. And there's a deep contradiction. We leave Korea in order to survive, but in the diaspora, we sometimes have to hide from Korean spaces in order to keep surviving in here. So for example, when my wife and I are walking on the street and we hear people speaking Korean on the other side, then we sometimes stop talking, pretending to be Chinese or Japanese. Oh, we don't get it. Not because we are ashamed, but because we are protecting ourselves. We do not always know whether that language will become a place of warmth or a place of judgment. So that is the kind of tension many Korean LGBTQ people carry. Maybe not only Korean immigrants, but also from many other parts of the world. So we hear stories of LGBTQ youth and others in Korea or even here being pushed to the edge or losing their lives because there is no safe place to breathe. I feel deep grief. I also feel responsibility because I'm survived here as a person of faith and as someone who was fortunate enough to survive and live in a country where I have legal protection. So that is one of the reasons KRU exists. We know that we cannot change everything overnight, but if KRU can create even a small space where one or two people at the edge of despair can breathe again, that matters. So to me, KRU is planting seeds of language, connection, and faith so people can name their pain and dignity so they do not have to survive alone and so they can hear again that they are beloved by God. So, and this is where I connect KRU with Marion Pope's legacy. Marion crossed boundaries toward people in vulnerable places. She did not stay where it was safe. She moved toward people whose body, dignity, and future were at risk. In my own time and context, I ask, where are the hidden vulnerable places now? So, For me, one of those places is among KRU, Korean LGBTQ people in the diaspora, people who may look as if they are living in a safer country, but who still carry fear, silence, and spiritual wounds within their own cultural and faith communities. So KRU is trying in our own time and context to cross boundaries toward those whose dignity and belonging have been denied. So hope is not always loud. Sometimes hope is simply someone breathing again. Sometimes hope begins when someone hears, "You are not alone." So that's why KRU is precious to me. We are just five of us. And that is where I see the seeds Marion Pope planted continuing to grow in our ministry today. To me, it's been 3 years since I joined the crew, and this journey has reminded me what my ministry is truly about, a calling rooted in solidarity with those who are oppressed and vulnerable. Even with our small group of volunteers, we continue to lean into that calling, reflecting on the life and ministry of Jesus, who always moved toward those on the margins. And we believe that we are beginning to see small fruits from our work. Last year, we attended the 75th anniversary of the Korean network in the United Church of Canada. So it was the first time we, as a crew, participated in a Korean event as a Korean LGBTQ group. We hesitated, to be honest, unsure whether we needed to be so visible at such a public gathering, especially given our past experiences with the hatred toward the LGBTQ people within the Korean community and churches. But still, we stood together with courage and quietly yet clearly said, "We are here." The most important outcome of this event was that people began to recognize our presence and engage in conversation with us without prejudice. After this event, we were invited to the North York Korean United Church and the Good Tree Korean United Church to have open conversation about queer life. It was also the first time a queer person had been invited by a Korean church to share a queer person's life story. So Harim shared with her wife, they shared their life story. Whatever the depth of those conversations at the time, it was profoundly meaningful for us. The people were willing to open their minds to listen to our stories. Compared to other events, this may seem very small, but for us, it is a deeply significant and empowering milestone, a moment to reflect on who we are and why we are here in this community. In God's way, the Holy Spirit surprisingly moved not only among people from those Korean churches, but also among us. So I believe if Marion had been there with us, she would have said like this, "Go, Kuru, go! Go, Kuru, go!" Thank you. I think this is where Marion Pope's legacy continues for us, not only in memory, but in the small and faithful work we are trying to live today. Our hope for this cruise future is that it will
remain a place of compassion, courage, and justice, just as Marion lived and worked. A community that stands with those on the margins and faithfully embodies God's love in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Today I wanted to show what Korean traditional dress looks like. So it is an honor to present in this workshop because Dr. Marion Pope, when I first met her at Belmont House, that was my interview. When I studied Master of Sacred Music here, my program director, Sue Hong, introduced me to Marion so I can interview her about her ministry in Korea, especially music ministry. So I'll begin with a brief overview of her life, calling, and the central role of music in her ministry. Dr. Alice Marion Pope, Korean name Bang Me-ryun, was born in Toronto, Canada on March 1st, 1928, to British immigrant parents Harriet and George Pope, and died on July 5th, 2025 at Belmont House, Toronto. She lived a life of service as a public health nurse in Canada, then a missionary nurse, educator, and musician and lyricist in Korea. Marion became active member of PROK, the Presbyterian Church in the Republic of Korea, known for its active commitment to social justice, democracy, work, and reunification. The United Church of Canada had partnered with the PROK, and so after returning to Canada for retirement, she joined with the United Church of Canada nationally and became a lay leader and a choir member in her local congregation, Trinity St. Paul's United Church. Her many interests include not only health science and nutrition related to her work as a missionary nurse, but also social justice, feminist, and contextual theology, environmental concerns, Korean culture and history, and Korean traditional music and church music. In my presentation today, I wish to highlight Dr. Marion Pope's musical interest and expertise, noting her impact on Korean church music. Marion was an accomplished musician and lyricist. She always sang in the choirs and often accompanied on piano or organ, contributing to church music where she could. She was a music director and organist in Gobek Confessing Church in Gwangju, music director for Jeja Disciples Church in Seoul, and also a music director in Minjung People's Church near Seoul. In this appointment, she encouraged Korean congregations to sing and appreciate traditional music, Korean music. She translated many Korean hymns into English as well as wrote hymns and in both Korean and English. She was instrumental in the creation of hymns based on Korean melodies, which was frowned upon within the Korean church at this time. Prioritize Western musical forms due to the Presbyterian missionaries. So embodying Korean cultural identities through music, she did in the late 19th century, where there were very few hymns in Korean hymn book based on traditional Korean music. Most Korean Christians had only learned Western church music and hymn poetry. The Korean translations of Western hymns hardly reflects in the rich color and emotional depth of Korean culture, and thus congregation could not fully engage hymns they sang with their hearts. Dr. Pope consistently sought to embody Korean values in her musical leadership. She actively encouraged contextuality in sacred music, demonstrating that Christian faith can be expressed with authenticity through one's own cultural heritage rather than merely using Western forms. In directing church choirs, she introduced Korean hymns and anthems that drew upon traditional Korean melodies using Korean pentatonic scales and rhythms. She endorsed young people to employing traditional Korean music, dance, and drama in worship when they led evening worship services. She also wore Korean traditional dress and encouraging the choir wear it too. In an article published in the United Church Observer in May 1994, volume 25, number 3, Dr. Pope reflected on her missionary work, expressing her approach to contextual theology in the title, quote, Overseas Mission, Holding Gospel and Culture in Creative Tension. Her experience in Korea had made her increasingly aware of the irony in teaching nursing, church music, and human values from traditional Korean thought and ethics to Korean students and lay people, while in a setting dominated by Western culture. She notes that over time, she had become aware of how much she herself had changed since coming to Korea. She learned to respect the value of Korean culture and to distinguish this from Western values. She had also learned to set different priorities according to these values, developing a respect for ceremonies or festivals, customs, and culture derived from other religion. She came to regret the result of Western cultural domination in interpreting the gospel. As the result, Marion worked to respect the truth and beauty of distinctly Korean religious beliefs and practices and how this might contextually inform Korean Christianity, which is new to that culture. In doing so, she affirmed and strengthened Korean identity with Christian worship. So her philosophy of translating hymns aligns with this approach to Korean culture I just discussed. In musical expression, language, culture, emotion, and sound intertwine. Marion was aware of this and approached translating Korean hymns to English with deep respect for preserving the particular Korean items, emotional colors, and text and rhythms. She sought to preserve the hymn writer's intention while allowing the translation to breathe with the warmth of Korean sentiment. The spiritual message remains central, but she enhanced it through aesthetic qualities rooted in Korean musical sensibilities, emphasizing the sentiment known as 정서, which entails emotional connection and heart. We can witness this today at this hymn festival. Following this session, as we will sing 3 hymns that she translated from Korean to English and 1 additional hymn that she composed lyrics to. Marion's translation work entered a new chapter in 1987 when she joined a choir at Hosanna Church in Seoul, meeting once a month with them when she wasn't working as a music director in another church. Here, this is an important person, La Eun-young, directed the choir and composed music that was sung. La Eun-young was a distinguished Korean composer whose work was gaining recognition in Korea. Drawn to the depth and spiritual of his music, Marion soon began collaborating with him, translating his Korean hymns into English and crafting original lyrics for his hymns. Their partnership grew into a creative exchange that shaped both their active artistic voices, and over time, they became a great musical friends. So I want to introduce a little bit about La Eun-young. Marion deeply respected Na Eun-young, born 1922, died 1993, as a Korean composer who worked to deepen and spread understanding of traditional Korean musical language. He wrote about 1,500 pieces, taught at university for over 42 years, published several musical theory books and 4 volumes of essays. He emphasized research, discovery, and preservation of Korean folk elements and reinterpreted them in contemporary ways, similar to Bartók and Kodaly. His approach provided a framework for future Korean composers seeking to balance traditional and innovation. He composed 13 symphonies, 6 concertos, 1 orchestral work, 1 opera, 12 chamber and piano works, 18 art songs, 29 lyric songs, 15 solo spirituals, 4 cantatas, and 202 children's songs. And this is another amazing story of him. La served choral conductor at Hosanna Church for 32 years, during which time he committed to writing 7 hymns per month as part of his devotion. In all, he composed, guess what, 1,239 hymns, continuing his vow until his month preceding his passing. I want to share Dr. Marion Pope's vision of music as a source of community solidarity and justice in times of struggle. She used music to create spaces of belonging, especially during periods of social struggle and suffering. She saw music as a way to express suffering in lament, proclaim hope, and inspire courage. For example, when she was a lay leader and music director at Jeja Disciples Church in Seoul, a congregation composed mostly of young factory workers, she prioritized singing in Korean, even secular contemporary songs written out of suffering, sacrifice, struggle, expressing Han, a deep-seated grief and yearning, encourage young people to help facilitate emotional release, communal bonding, and spiritual openness. Through shared singing and participation, she nurtured resilience and collective hope. Marion's similar approach was appreciated by people from Gobek Church in Gwangju. Her love, goodness, and generous heart, linked with an unyielding stance for justice and support for those who suffer, was part of her faith community commitment to embody the love of God in her life. In her annual report written to the United Church of Canada, Marion describes how she was strengthened by the faithfulness of PROK, encouraged by their concept of mission, and filled with hope in their ministry of sharing in the sufferings of God's people in the struggle for God's justice and peace. So I want to conclude the legacy of Marion Pope's missionary calling. In bringing my presentation to a close, I want to emphasize how music was for Marion a means to connect with God and with others. Her spirituality was inseparable from her commitment to justice. Worship and activism were mutually reinforcing, and music played a key role in this, an extension of her missionary calling to serve others. Her music ministry was holistic expression of faith, culture, justice building community, embodying Korean identity, integrating spiritual practice with compassionate presence among suffering communities, embodying the way of Jesus. With the wings of our mind, the title of a hymn Dr. Marion Pope translated is a fitting way to describe this expansiveness of her witness. Her vision and work took many shapes, all of it informed by a deep respect and love for Korean culture. Her commitment to churches, her nursing philosophy and practices, her personal relationships with students and colleagues, and her music. Thank you.
Well, speaking about the support, you know, I was a minister of a congregation, the Korean congregation. And when I went to the Korean congregation, there was somebody not Korean sitting in the pew. So I was wondering who that was and wondering whether she understand me. And at the end of the service, she came to me and to shake hands and said, 참 잘했어요, which means well done. And I also, we were the, neighboring church ministers as well. And she attended my congregation until I left for 10 years, every Sunday, and good times and not so good times. So she always there. And sometimes she correct, usually correct my English. And we had a beautiful and excellent friendship for over 40 years. Her favorite Korean food is 된장 두부, 순두부찌개, which is the, what is it? Stew, yeah. A tofu stew with 된장. Miso. And yeah. And I am wondering, I shared with my neighbor when I sit there, but wondering whether it is too personal or not. But I really like that story and feel very sad. She was 1957, was it? She met Korean man on the boat on her way to Korea, and that man was just finished study in the States or somewhere. The ship left from San Francisco, so they on their way on the boat they met. And the relationship developed for a while in Korea even. They really liked each other and loved each other. However, his family and the parents already arranged a marriage. And I was privileged to read a letter he wrote to her and said, "Dear, respectful, loving Miss Pope." And in a very courteous and letter, and I am very sorry we cannot meet again. I heard that man and his brothers found a university in Korea as educators and educated leaders. That is sad, but she always said, "I am beloved, the child of God, as well as I am beloved, woman of a man." It was a beautiful story. Yeah. And you want to say? Yes.
No, no, I'm like David. That story I did not know until Kay told me today. But like Kay, I was a pastor in the 90s, and she was incredibly supportive to me personally at Trinity St. Paul's and brought all of the social justice that we've learned about into that congregation in so many ways. I finally completed a doctoral degree at the age of 81, and Marion was one of the people that had to do this. But one of the wonderful things was that someone, Jillian Graham, and others, we had a little gathering online, and Marion had read some of the thesis, and she asked those same penetrating, right to the heart of the matter questions. It was such a moment of delight for me. I treasure her deeply. She was beloved, not just by God and a man, the rest of us do.
I could introduce myself. Hi, I'm Sui Hong. I teach sacred music here at Emmanuel College, and I just made the quick dash from TST to come here because I just finished a class over there. Don't mind me. So my topic for this afternoon is Isabel Taylor, birth year 1909 and passed to glory 1992. Why is she special? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And so we will be going through a little bit of background. She was a Canadian Presbyterian missionary and went to Taiwan. She preceded, her year is different from Marion Pope. So you will see that. And then so from the background of Taiwan, we will talk a little bit about the background of Isabel Taylor. And then after that, we will go on to talk about her influence on Itolo. I'm not sure whether you know Itolo, but Itolo is a well-known church music Asian scholar. And then after that, we'll do a quick assessment about her particular contribution. So I'll begin. In 1858, following the Qing government in China's defeat in the Second Opium War, the Treaty of Tianjin was signed with the Russian Empire, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. Now, under the treaty, Taiwan's northern port of Tamsui and the southern port of Kaohsiung were open for foreign trade. This development not only stimulated economic exchanges, but also reintroduced Christianity to the people of the island. In the 1860s, missionaries start arriving into Taiwan. British Presbyterian missionaries conducted their ministry in the Kaohsiung area, which is southern Taiwan, while Canadian Presbyterians missionaries were situated in the Tamsui area in northern Taiwan. Aside from overt evangelism and building churches, the Western missionaries sought to raise the living conditions of the populace through building schools and hospitals. They were also involved in introducing educational curriculum, including Western classical music education, and the missionaries will actually serve as teachers in the in the mission school, or what we call the church-sponsored schools, seminaries, and churches. Background of Isabel. Isabel Taylor was born in Scotland in 1909 before her family immigrated to Canada when she was just 18 months old. Having completed her music studies, guess where? No, not U of T. Yes, right. The Toronto Conservatory of Music, or our present day RCM, in Canada. Isabel Taylor, was appointed to serve as a missionary in Taiwan by the Presbyterian Church in Canada. She arrived into Taiwan in 1931, and she taught music at the Tam King Girls' School in Tamsui, northern Taiwan. 7 years later, she became the leader of the Taipei Choir and also taught at Taipei Theological College and Tamsui Women's School. Now, with the outbreak of World War II, Taylor was forced to return to Canada. She did not have a holiday. She actually came back to North America, and then she went down to Westminster Choir College in New Jersey and took lessons to strengthen her piano and her conducting skills. Upon the conclusion of the war, she, instead of staying in Canada, she went back to Taiwan. In 1958, she started, no, not 1948, sorry. She returned in 1947 and resumed teaching at Tam Kang Girls' School in Tamsui. Now, in cooperation with her former student, Chen Xizhi, Taylor co-founded the Chunde Girls High School for gifted music students. This was a pioneering development for music education in Taiwan. They've never had that. And it was Isabel who brought it to them. In 1958, Taylor became the secretary of the hymn book committee of the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan to oversee the revision of the denominational hymnal, Sang Chul, out of 523 hymns slated for publication in 1964. This appointment meant that she had to move south because the headquarters at that time of the Presbyterian Hymnal Committee was in south, in Tainan area. Where am I? And there, while she went down to the south, she also was employed or appointed to teach at Tainan Theological College in Tainan. There, she undertook her responsibility to do teaching and do the hymnal work for the next 7 years. Although after the 7 years, she relocated back to the north and taught at Tam Kang Middle School in Tamsui, where she continued to teach until her retirement in 1973. Now, I will pause here a little bit and tell you that when she moved from Taipei down to Tainan, that was where she met Itolo. And Itolo was a student. Earlier on, I mentioned that she was working with a former student. That seems to be her way of ministry. Somehow she's able to mother all these young, bright people and launch them in their ministry. And that's exactly the same thing that she did with Itolo. It is during her sojourning and teaching in Tainan in between 1958 to 1965 that she taught Itolo. Now, due to his financial situation, Low became Taylor's assistant in the hymnal revision committee as part of his work study work. It was also during this time that Taylor organized a musical using the Passion Play, a black spiritual musical by Mary Lou Taggart for her seminary. Now, this particular musical was brought to her by George Todd, another American Presbyterian missionary based in Taiwan. And so she asked Taylor asked Low to translate the work into the vernacular, into Hokkien, for the seminary choir to sing. Instead of merely complying, if you know Dr. Low, he never complies. He will have his own idea. He asked the question to Taylor, should there be a Taiwanese, a yellow spiritual instead? Upon hearing that idea, she encouraged him to explore the possibility. This led Low to create the work, He Walked the Lonesome Valley, matching it to the Taiwanese lament song, Q Tiao A. Figure 1, please, Shane. The work became the first effort of the church music contextualization by Itolo. First one. Having taken Low into her tutelage, Taylor was able to observe and access Low's ability. Taylor and her missionary colleague, Kathleen Moody, were suitably impressed with Low's musical skills and recommended him to the principal of Tainan, Shoki Ko, for Low to be trained as a church music faculty for the college. As a result, because of their recommendation, when Low graduated from Tainan in 1963, he was appointed faculty in development of the seminary and sent to Union Theological College in New York for further training. In assessment, in reviewing Taylor as an important figure in the field of music missions within the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan, she was also honored to have the title Mother of Piano in Taiwan because of her gift and the ability to teach piano music. She had many, many disciples. And if you want to know more about that, you can speak to Victor because he's from Taiwan. It is through Taylor's ministry's effort of equipping talented locals that enabled Low to make his substantive contribution to global hymnody. In this regard, Isabel Taylor's ministry is far-reaching, beyond the music ministry of the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan, and the music education she pioneered in Taiwan, much more than that. Through her influence, her ministry of encouragement of its Low now touches many people around the world through the Asian Christian congregational song phenomenon that he pioneered. And with that, I think I'll end my very short spiel about Isabel Taylor because what you discover that she was somebody who literally worked behind the scene, and her ability to multiply the gifts that she has truly impacted the world of church music. All it takes was one woman from Canada to change the world. Thank you.
Ever-flowing spirit, you dance in the crystal of falling water, springing from the mountain to the greening valley, well in the depths of the ground, ready to leap into the delight of the thirsty, frolic in the stream, and gather in the river, to hold and enfold the laughter of children. You nourish the cattle, the rice seedlings, the fruit of the hills. You sing, living spirit. You gasp in the dry rocks and drop no more jewels of light to the parched land. You sink in the seeping poisons of old hollows among the paddies. Strangled by the detritus of aliens, choking on the gases of steel and brick, you would weep if you had any, and you die in us, your creation. Ever-flowing Spirit, flow in us and renew our spirits until we flow in you to leap and dance and laugh again in fountains of melody, springs of harmony, rivers of song. Oh, that we flow in your spirit.
Wow. We are very full with our full, thankful heart and soul and mind and spirit. So I thank Deborah Park for providing a beautiful handwritten prayer that Marion Pope wrote. So 80% of these words are from her. So let us pray with a thankful heart. Dear God of Ruha, God of wind, giver of wisdom and mercy, of courage and faithfulness, of comfort and hope, we praise you for your goodness and your grace today as we celebrate the life and the legacy of your servant leader, Dr. Marion Pope, as we also celebrated the women and music in ministry. We know how precious she was in your sight. We know how much she loved you and followed your will through her mission work in Korea and beyond. What Marion did in Korea was to share your love and your justice and peace, not just with words, but in deeds. Help us remember her and carry out her legacy in our own places. Please send us your spirit and pour it out into the world as you did through your servant Marion, as we witnessed that spirit was poured into the world back then, and now that still needs so much healing. God, giver of abundant life, as we move on to this day and days ahead, help us to love and be loved, to touch and be touched, to heal and be healed. Let us take with us the blessing of God, source of love, of Christ, love incarnate, and of the Holy Spirit, love's power, wherever we go. Amen.
Celebrating women in ministry and the life and legacy of Marion Pope. We've lifted gratitude to God for Marion's life and work. As many have said during the afternoon, Marion would not have wanted this event to have had a singular focus on her. So it is a measure of our respect for her that this has also been an event to celebrate women in ministry. And it's also been a blessed opportunity to share memories and stories, an opportunity to be encouraged with the taste of beloved community, to be reminded again of the vision God holds for all creation, and to be strengthened for the journey ahead. I invite you as we close our time to join me in prayer. Loving and compassionate Creator, you are the source of all goodness. Your abundant mercy flows freely to each and every one. We give thanks today that your love through Christ strengthens and renews us day by day. We give thanks for your life-giving spirit that brings us together to discern your will and your way. We give thanks today especially for the life of Marion Pope, diaconal minister, nurse, educator, mission co-worker, musician, ecumenist, feminist, justice seeker, lifelong learner, deep listener, wise elder, colleague, sister. We give thanks for Marion's witness and legacy and pray that we will be empowered to face the challenges in the world that you so love with hope, courage, and creative energy. May deep wisdom guide us together as we move forward, living love and justice. We trust in your great faithfulness. Amen. I've been thinking a lot about Marion. Like many of you, I am going to focus a little bit on Marion, but very briefly. I knew of Marion long before I met her. My parents trained for mission in the late 50s. And when they were sent to Japan, Marion and Marion, the two Marions, went to Korea. So my parents used to tell me stories of Marion Pope. And so I was more than a little intimidated when I met her for the first time. And I have a lot of memories of her, even though I only met her after she returned from Korea. Let me share briefly just 3 indelible impressions that she left on me. My first encounter with Marion was, I think, in 1994. And it was then that I first got a sense of her understanding of Christian discipleship as lifelong vocation. I was co-director of the Canadian Churches Forum for Global Ministries at the time, and she was participating in one of the forum's core programs, the Returning Missionaries program, that was sometimes known as the Re-Entry program for personnel returning to live in Canada after a period of service with global partners overseas. She told me quite crisply that she did not agree with what she perceived to be the, quote, underlying therapeutic approach, unquote, to the program, as if participants returning to life in Canada needed some sort of help for the transition. She said that while she understood that her surroundings would change and perhaps her day-to-day rhythm, her vocation would not. And any who knew her will attest that in the years and indeed decades that followed, Marion continued to embody intercultural mission, to intercultural Christian service, to mentor, accompany, and encourage others to listen deeply, to quietly ask fundamental questions that sought to clarify purpose and vision. Marion also embodied for me a missiology of partnership that I came to understand more deeply through her. She would say that it was her teacher, Catherine Hawken, who imbued in her the importance of living simply, sharing resources ecumenically, and living with the people with whom one served in partnership. So it's perhaps not surprising that Marion took some issue with the United Church term overseas personnel, quote unquote. She said that it would be far better to use the term that Korean partners gave, and that is mission co-worker. Marion would remind any who asked, and some that didn't, quite respectfully and firmly, that while the United Church may have sent personnel overseas, they were sent in response to invitations from global partners to serve and be responsible to them. She would reiterate what for many of us is the bedrock of United Church missiology, that global partner churches discern what God's mission is for them in their context, and any invited to that context serve as companions, as co-workers alongside those of that place. A third impression was gained when I visited Korea and Korean partners on behalf of the United Church and saw the immense respect and regard that colleagues had for Marion. Of course, I knew of Marion's deep love for Korea and had a sense of the regard with which she was held. But I came to understand more deeply that part of that respect, that regard, was rooted in her empathy for the Korean experience of Han, that profound blend of sorrow, regret, anger, and longing. An empathy that was rooted not only in her witness of trauma like that of Gwangju in May of 1980, but her decades of shared life with the people that she came to love so very deeply. She came to feel in her very marrow the depth of yearning of so many Korean people for the reconciliation and reunification of their land. For me, that is expressed perhaps nowhere more poignantly than in the hymn O So So, that she paraphrased in translation. And for me, when one listens to her paraphrase, that hymn is so direct in its requests. Each stanza a petition addressed to God in a variety of names: God of love, God our Savior, hope of unity, requesting the Prince of Peace to come and make us one body. Christian disciple, mission co-worker, beloved companion. We heard earlier that Marion's Korean name is Pang Mei-ryun. I wondered what Mei-ryun meant. And any Asian would know that depends on the Chinese characters that are used for those two words that come together in that name. I asked Mary Collins, who asked Kim Yunjun, if she knew the meaning of the characters. Neither of them did, although Yunjun said that Ryun is quite rare to be used as a name. So Mary and I turned to that inexhaustible source, Google, and Google said that Mei-ryun, the two characters, Mei-ryun, could break down as Mei, or plum blossom, and ryun as code, or relationship, or order. As a full name, Mei-ryun conveys a sense of grace, resilience, and harmonious relationship. Like a plum blossom enduring the winter, reflecting virtuous character. Amen. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more big smile. Last one. On 3, say go Marion. Yeah. Oh, sorry, not that. One more. Okay, once again. 1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1.